Good morning, Internet, and welcome to Grand Theft Auto, the first one. Today we are reacting to the making of and sort of cutscenes of this game, and it's gonna be a ton of fun. Grand Theft Auto. So this is what the original was like, and the reason why we're reacting to this instead of playing it is because I don't have real good access to this game, as well as there's not much of a story at all in this game. As you guys can see, this is what the game looked like. We did a Let's Play on Grand Theft Auto 3 and Vice City and all the other Grand Theft Autos. We have a whole playlist of all of them in order, but I feel really weird about not including the first two Grand Theft Autos, and so I want to just do a quick reaction to show you guys what it was like, because some of you guys have no idea how the Grand Theft Auto series got started. And so this is really what it is. You just drive around and do the missions that people ask you to do. And that's really it. That's really it. There are some sort of cutscenes, kind of, to this game. I guess you could kind of consider them cutscenes, and we're going to watch them at the end of this video. But I want to share with you guys a little bit of the making of this game, because I haven't seen that before. I think that's going to be a lot more interesting to see what started off the whole Grand Theft Auto series. And then we're going to be watching the cutscenes at the end, so stick around for that. But yeah, let's go ahead and hop over to the documentary. Alright, so this is the documentary. This is by Jordan H.J. Making Grand Theft Auto. Here we go.
Grand Theft Auto is one of the biggest selling franchises of all time.
Yes, it
and
is.
has been defining the open world genre for over 20 years. It's grown into a hugely ambitious series with a global audience, so it's easy to forget its humble origins. Today, we take a look at where it all came from, the original Grand Theft Auto from 1997, and how they made the game from concept to creation in The Making of Grand Theft Auto.
Sweet.
Dave Jones founded DMA
By the
Design
way, the
in
link to this is going to be in the
1987.
description.
He found there was a lack of established developers in Scotland and wanted to write his own games to start a potential career in game development. He worked on the title Menace, which was eventually picked up by publisher Psygnosis. He was still doing a computer science degree whilst developing his game part-time, eventually releasing it in 1988, followed by another shooter, Bloody Money, the following year. These games did well, and Jones found himself in a position to run his company full-time, rent an office, and hire an employee, Mike Daly. DMA continued to work with Psygnosis, eventually releasing their first major hit, Lemmings. The idea for Lemmings was sparked by an animation Daly created of little people walking up a hill getting nuked by a big gun over and over again on loop. The game came out for the Amiga in 1991, selling 55,000 copies on its first day, ending up with ports to every computer and console imaginable, setting the company up as an established studio. The success of Lemmings had a negative aspect.
I never heard of that console
By the time
before.
the team was developing Lemmings 3, the commercial pressures and contracts meant that the game was rushed and not quite as good as the others.
No,
DMA
Rush
had
game
lost
is
their
bad.
passion for the series and wanted to move on to other projects. By 1994, Mike Daly was working on a brand new game engine. One of his jobs in the design department as a graphics engine programmer was to tinker with new concepts to find something that might be made into a good game. The engine effectively simulated a bird's eye view of the city, whilst giving parallax movement of buildings and allowing the camera to pull in and out.
That's pretty
The
cool.
way it did this was that Daly's engine allowed a camera to swivel around connected blocks in an isometric view. Originally, the camera was always side-on, but it didn't look particularly great. After playing the Sega Saturn game Clockwork Knight, Daly got the idea to paint roads onto the walls, so even though the view was side-on, it would appear to be a top-down view. They realised that the connected blocks could be buildings, and therefore they'd be able to build a whole city out of the engine. Dave Jones was always fascinated by the idea of giving players tools and giving them
So
the
that's
freedom
why
to do
Grand
what
Theft
they
Auto
wanted within a game world,
was top-down.
rather than have them be led by the hand, which influenced a lot of the game's development. In a 1997 interview, he said that he hated linear gameplay, and his idea of the ultimate game would be to take real-world physics, model them perfectly, give the player an open environment, and just let them explore. He loved anything that was as open-ended as possible. After seeing Daly's
there weren't
engine,
sandbox
he thought of
games back
helicopters
then.
chasing speeding vehicles, which naturally evoked images of cops and robbers. This would evolve into the idea for a game called Race and Chase. Dave Jones said the first thing DMA always asked when anyone had an idea for a game was what was different about it. They wanted to take risks, put out new and interesting games, and not simply follow trends. In order for the game to officially start as a project, they'd have to put together a game design document.
So Race and Chase was
Let's
the
take a look at that
original
now,
working
to see
title
how the game
of
changed
Grand Theft Auto?
from its original concept in
Makes
early
sense.
1995. Keith Hamilton, who would lead the programming on it, wrote the document off the back of meetings that DMA designed between the team. The original idea of the game was for it to be a fun, addictive, and fast multiplayer car racing and crashing game set in the present day world. The three cities were originally New York, Venice, and Miami, and the basic structure of different missions leading to opening up new cities.
Well, New York and
was already
Miami
set.
happened.
The document states that players will be able to drive cars and possibly other vehicles. Cars can be stolen, raced, collided, crashed, and have to be navigated around a large map, and that stealing a car could attract the police. There were several different mission types scoped out, of which various concepts from them remained in the game,
That made it
but
into
not in the
Grand
same
Theft Auto.
fashion. They thought of Cannonball Run, which was a simple time trial, Demolition Derby, which involved causing as much damage to other cars, and two different bank robbery style games, one in which you play as the police trying to catch bank robbers, and one in which you play as robbers attempting a getaway. Much of the graphical style in this document was kept for the final release, as it was based on the overhead engine that Daly had come up with. Interestingly, the target systems for the time were DOS, Windows, PlayStation, Saturn, and Ultra 64. Saturn and Nintendo 64 would eventually not get a release. The rest of the document describes the type of city that the game will take place in, the size of it, the layout.
Could you imagine
and some of
Grand
the
Theft
obstacles
Auto
the players
coming
would
out
come
on
up
the
against.
N64?
Interestingly, when listing types of pedestrians that could be run over by cars, they included school children, lollipop ladies, and dogs. For my American viewers, a lollipop lady is what you call a crossing guard. What was described in these documents was a fresh,
Okay, I've
ambitious
never heard of
title,
lollipop
one that
lady
had a
before.
reasonable set of features and an acceptable scope. The development would change this, and the original date of completion they had set of July 1st, 1996 would not be hit. With the dates being set and a design document ready, development of the game could begin. The game was supposed to take 18 months, but it would end up taking 30. Three
wow.
designers were put on the project, and the first task was to create the game world. The three designers took large graph sheets and started designing the city. They immediately thought of America, and the cities they thought would be good reference points for the game were Manhattan, San Francisco, and Miami, which became Liberty City, San Andreas, and Vice City respectively. They didn't have the budget to visit the real cities in order to capture the feel of these cities, so instead went to the local library, used what little internet access was available, and watched movies and listened to music, referencing shows like Knight Rider and A-Team and the movie Speed. They often revised the concepts and goals of the game after watching these movies. Billy Thompson said that some of the original missions involved things like pizza delivery, which they quickly scrapped because they thought it wasn't fun at all, being replaced by concepts that they had gleaned from the action set pieces they saw in these pieces of media. The designers were not initially impressed by the prototype. Paul
You guys
Farley,
imagine
one of the
if Grand
designers,
Theft Auto was
said
all
it
about
looked like a
pizza
crappy
delivery?
2D driving game. As the development began and they started creating the cities, their inspiration was sparked. They started having more and more ideas, such as allowing the player to pick missions by visiting phone boxes and expanding the scope and openness of the game world, which had some resistance by the coding team, who was worried about actually implementing all of the ideas the designers were coming up with. This initial lack of understanding between the designers and coders would come back in the development to cause some major problems for the project. The game would change from its original concept. Early on, they removed the ability to play as a police officer. They found that it just wasn't fun to play as the police in the sandbox playground they was creating. The fun bits were knocking over pedestrians, running red lights, speeding, causing chaos, breaking the law. So the
makes
focus
sense.
was changed to just playing as the criminals. And the ability to play as a policeman, as writer Brian Baglow described it, was dropped like a live grenade. Baglow said that this change in direction was crucial
A lot
in
of
the game's
games like this
development,
get
giving it a
criticism
much clearer
for
focus,
being the
the goal of
anti-hero,
the game being
and
much
I think
more
it's
obvious.
because it's just not fun being the
Daly
hero.
has said in an interview with The Guardian that
There are some
development
games
was
that
not
have done it
smooth.
correctly, like
They were adding little
Infamous
things to the game
does a good
constantly
job.
because they thought they were cool. However, it ended up having a
Well, they do
massive
give you
amount
the
of
option.
bugs and things that didn't work, with Daly describing the car collision code as being spaghetti junction. It had got into a mess. Part of the reason the code had become so messy was due to the design of the game itself. The open-ended nature meant there was lots of different components to the game, and players could do missions in any order or cause chaos that they hadn't planned for. Writer Brian Baglow said that the development process meant he often had difficulty as a writer figuring out why the players were doing the task they was assigned. The normal process was that the designers would create a mission or task independently of the writers and then pass it over to them to figure out the script, story and context of the mission. They'll get given a series of tasks and have to think of a way to tie it all together and create some sort of narrative. What added complexity to this was the non-linear nature of the game. The order that the task could be undertaken was up to the player.
Yeah, they
The
definitely
script had to be written
added
in a
more
way
of a
that was
narrative
flexible
later in
enough
the
for this to
games.
work. They managed to solve this by creating fewer recurring characters that would become familiar rather than lots of small throwaway ones. This way, the player would feel as if they were still progressing in a story and getting to know the characters, but the missions could happen out of order. Baglow said that the flat structure of the company meant that there was a great sense of unity amongst the team, but that sometimes ideas and concepts were thrown into the game without much of a sense of how it may complicate things further down the line. By the middle of development, the game was in a rough state, had missed several deadlines and was still incredibly buggy and not particularly fun to play. Sam Hauser was running the interactive division of music label BMG in 1996 when he found out about DNA
I'm so
design
curious what you
and the
guys are
game he
learning
was
from
working
this.
on, Grand Theft
Like
Auto.
what have you
He showed it
guys
to his brother,
learned
Dan
about
Hauser,
Grand Theft Auto
who
that you
wasn't
didn't know
impressed
before?
when he first saw it. The 2D graphics
Write in the live
and general
chat, or
instability
if you're
of the
watching
code
later, write in the
made him
comments.
think it wasn't worth much. However, when they did come to play it, they understood the magic and began to see the potential. DMA and BGM reached a deal for BGM to publish the game. The delays and the nature of the development was noticed by the publishers BMG. On the weekly conference calls, they often raised concerns and more than once considered scrapping the game entirely, with Baglow stating that it was under constant threat of cancellation. The longer the game was in development, the less it stacked up to its competitors. The publishers were worried that if you put these graphics next to something like Tomb Raider, there would be no contest.
Yeah, really.
Dave Jones said they wanted to kill the game, and they'd have to argue constantly to keep it going. It didn't help.
I'm
The
surprised how
unstable nature of
successful
the
it
game Made it
was
a difficult proposition.
in
Gary Penn
comparison
was
to
brought in as the
the
creative
other
director
stuff
and
on
producer
PlayStation.
with the goal of sorting out the project. He identified that the disconnect between the designers and writers meant that often they didn't meet in the middle, and things often didn't seem to make sense. Penn described this development as trying to nail jelly to kittens. He was someone who would say no to the team and stop lots of random features being added in because people thought it was cool, without an understanding
Like
of
nailing
the bigger picture.
jelly to kittens.
He said that calling the development anarchic would have been too sexy. It was better described as messy. The two biggest problems with the game when he was brought in was stability. It constantly crashed and at times was barely playable. The other thing was the car handling. It was not good, and at one point there was even a button for opening the doors. It just wasn't fun. There was also differing mentalities. Some wanted to focus on the simulation aspects of creating a living city, whilst others are more interested in the racing, without the two sides gelling well together. Part of this can be attributed to the young age of the team. Many of the people working on it had never worked on a game before, leading to situations in which the designers and writers were doing things that the coders couldn't do, which caused things to have to be redesigned, rewritten, and ended up prolonging the development. It's worth mentioning that this was not the only game that DMA had in development. They had grown to a large studio and was working on multiple titles, including a couple for the Nintendo 64 and other consoles, as well as a range of PC titles. GTA became the game that people didn't want to work on due to its buggy reputation. The GTA team worked alongside the team that was developing Silicon Valley for the Nintendo 64 and Tactics for the PC, so the game was hardly created in a bubble, and this only exacerbated its problems against the more polished titles. One day there was a bug in the code, in which the police became overly aggressive, trying to ram the player off the road and attacking them straight away. This little moment caused the team to look at the game and realise that just messing about was fun, and they became less worried about the missions and simulation and more on just what was fun. It helped gel the team together, start to create focus and joined up nature and the overall goal that had been
Yeah, that is fun in the
This,
Grand Theft Auto
along
games
with Penn's
where
ability to say
if
no
you
to
have
people
like
and try
2 or
and set
3
up
stars or
obtainable
more,
objectives,
the police
finally
just
put the
go
game back on a
ape
proper path to
shit
completion.
and try to
Paul Farley
knock you off the
said that
road and
things
like
the
kill
weak
themselves
graphics
in the
didn't matter
process.
to them because they thought they was creating a great game. Farley said in an interview with The Guardian that the plan was for the game to always be 18 rated, so they felt they could poke as much fun at US culture as they liked, and they didn't have any boundaries in the game design. That being said, there was times when they felt they went too far, even for an 18 rating, and removed the content. One such example is a cancelled mission in which you have to go around setting churches on fire. Some of the pokes at culture came from features in the code. For example, the Hare Krishnas that follow each other around happened because of a piece of code that made several characters follow each other down the street. They wasn't sure what to do with this algorithm, but someone suggested they could be Hare Krishnas with chanting and tambourines. They suggested that if they was run over, the word Guranga would pop up. Baglow said that many of the game's little features came about like this, that the engine wasn't particularly sophisticated, so they did anything they could to give the player the most bang for their buck. The game had finally come together. Being made up of 3 cities, Liberty City, Vice City and San Andreas, the players could choose a character amongst 8 different criminals and be let loose upon the cities to either complete missions, rack up 1,000,000 points, or just cause havoc. Points could be gained by destroying vehicles, running people over, fighting the police, stealing cars and more. The game ended up with an unusual mission structure, in that you could do them in any order, but if you failed, that was it. You had to restart that level of the city in order to try the mission again. This was because the missions would grant points, and further successful missions would act as a multiplier, increasing your point gain. Players could also be killed by other gangsters or the police, resulting in becoming wasted. The police would relentlessly hunt down lawbreakers, smashing into them with their vehicles and attacking them with progressively higher numbers. It was an incredibly fun game, and the loose set of ideas had come together marvellously. Grand Theft Auto kicked off a grand tradition for the franchise in the focus on a wide range of different radio music and styles. Colin Anderson, who worked on the music for the game, said he was approached to figure out how they could do something fresh and innovative with the sound and music. When he thought of the idea of having different radio stations playing different genres, the ideas naturally flew from there. However, they quickly found that nobody in the music industry wanted to license any music to them because the game was a complete unknown, so they made the decision to create all the music for all the stations themselves. The first problem they had was storage capacity. A CD could hold 74 minutes of music, but with the game taking up a portion of the disc, they only had room for 60 minutes. If they created 3 music tracks, this was 20 songs they could include. They realised that for it to work, they had to make each song distinct and span as many genres as possible. The genres they ended up with 3 songs each, were funk, trance, techno, country, pop, rock and hip hop. The 3 musicians working on the game, Colin Anderson, Craig Connor and Grant Middleton, worked in a practical way, leaving it up to
all this fit on a
music
CD.
as best they could. They would say they needed 10 minutes of rock music, for example, and let the musician work it out. One of the tracks, God Bless All the Universe, had to be heavily censored for the release, whilst others, such as a version of Star Spangled Banner, never made it in. Anderson said in an interview with Louder Sound that his favourite track was the title, Joyride by Da Shooters, because the lyrics are self-referential, and the song helped rally everyone to the idea of the musical direction that they wanted to take. One of their main concerns with the use of the car radio providing the in-game soundtrack was that the music would naturally stop and start as the player got in and out of cars. However, when it came to implement the music, this actually added to the experience and gave a sense of excitement during driving. Unlike the other entries in the series, GTA 1 only just barely touches on the parody DJs and spoof commercials that the later games would focus on. For this one, it was all about the music. Craig Connor teamed up with rapper Johnny Wilson to do hip-hop songs in the game because he felt he couldn't do the lyrics, hanging up some duvets as a makeshift vocal recording studio. The soundtrack for the game became as iconic as the gameplay, with a wide variety of genres matching the variety of action that was on offer. Individual tracks have become fan favourites, with the main Grand Theft Auto theme still being iconic to this day. The game was finally released in Europe in October 1997 on PC, unfortunately to mixed reviews. Despite the 2.5 years of game development, critics were initially not overly impressed, giving it average scores, praising the gameplay but decrying the graphics. The PlayStation version was due to release in December of 1997, and it was a difficult port. Daly has said in an interview with The Guardian that he thought the guys that did the PlayStation version had a huge challenge when they handed them the code, because the game was built in a way that needed a big amount of memory, which the PlayStation just didn't have. Adding to this, Russell Kay, who worked on the PlayStation version, said that because the game was still being developed, up until a week before its release on the PC, there was still content that was being added in that version that they simply didn't have the time to add into the PlayStation 1, as they had to provide a final master a month before release. Dave Jones said that they expected there would be some sort of backlash to the game when it was released. They had previous experience of this, with Lemmings being accused of inciting devil worship in the deep south of the USA. But ultimately, they said that the game was no worse than most films or TV shows, and that had always been honest, it was meant for adults. In the UK, the Daily Mail heavily criticised the game for its violent themes, and it was targeted by papers, politicians and censorship groups across Europe. Ultimately, Jones felt that it ended up being useful to the developers, giving the game a large amount of press, and they're never worried by the criticism. Perhaps because of all the press attention, the game became a bestseller in Europe, and would go on to be a defining game in both the PC and PlayStation libraries. Prior to the game's American release,
controversy is definitely free advertising.
Dave Jones said he was concerned about the reaction GTA would get in the USA. They felt that the 2D overhead nature of the game wouldn't be a good sell, as 3D games were selling best over there, whereas graphics wasn't as important in the European market. Ultimately, the game would sell well, implanting itself in the consciousness of gamers. Despite the decent sales the game would garner, it wasn't enough to save the interactive division of BMG, which would eventually be sold off to Take-Two for just $9 million. Take-Two then spun this division into the publishing label Rockstar Games, which would go on to take the helm of Grand Theft Auto and turn it into a world-conquering games franchise, massively eclipsing its origins. Today, Grand Theft Auto is known by different gamers for different things. If you played it when it came out, you may remember it as the fun open-world action game in which you could drive around a city and cause some chaos. If you was of a certain age at the time, you may remember the controversy and the huge PR storm the game received. If you're a younger gamer, you may simply know this game as a prequel to one of the modern ones, perhaps never actually seeing it be played before.
I feel like a lot of you are in that camp.
I spent a lot of time playing it, and is still a lot of fun to play. There's no strings to it, it's just open world action. You jump straight in, speed some cars around the city, and have fun. It may have ended up living in the shadow of its children, but it doesn't deserve to be forgotten.
Sweet.
Hey,
That was an awesome
Ruth,
documentary.
I got a warning for you for bald
So,
dancing and
if you could call anything a
crossing
cutscene in that
again,
game,
I'll
then this would be
stick
it.
a gun up your ass and blow your f***ing eyeballs out.
So I guess in between missions,
Yeesh.
this would be what some of the characters would say when we would beat a mission.
Crawling up my ass with flashlights looking for you. I booked you a flight to San Andreas.
Thanks, boy.
We are building a crime syndicate of extraordinary magnitude. We extort money in the tradition of our ancestors. You honor our family. You have our gratitude.
Hey, pretty boy!
Oh my gosh.
You done real good for me, no? Now it's time for you to find out why they call me the donkey, huh? Ha ha! I'm gonna reward you personal this time.
Well, great.
You listen to me, you two-bit sucker. I hear you're working behind my back. If that's true, I'm gonna you like a crazy bitch. Get the out of my sight.
Hey, Rude boy, got the idea that you got the job done and thing. I'm just saying well done on that. Serious cash in the briefcase, you know. So, I don't think I'll be seeing you for a long time.
Listen, right, we're looking for a lad who can do his stuff. I've heard you're a bit tasty. No messing around or you get a slap. Remember, I'm the monkey and you're the cheese grater, so no messing around.
Okay.
Just a little bit pleased with yourself, ain't ya? And rightly so, rightly so. You're on the way to being a big face in this filthy cesspit. You done me a few favours, so I'm going to do you a very big favour. You and me now, and the Chris twins are getting on a bit. In a few years, I'll be taking over the whole bread basket. And if you got that special something, you can too. Now stop loafing around and get to work.
All right, my boy. Pretty little thing, ain't you? And we want to keep you like that.
The heck?
Things have been getting out of hand, and we need you
Okay.
to mend a few broken pipes, fix a few ungrateful little gits, or Archie will lose his temper, and nobody will be happy. God, and Bennett, that was some firework. Look, there must have been some mistake, Flower. Well, look, just so you don't come at us with a bleeding A-bomb next time, we're getting out of here. Arch is off to Devon, and I'm leaving the country. Heading for Thailand, actually. Very posh.
Very posh.
Listen, right, we've heard you're a boy who can do his stuff. And by hookers and by crooks, you've proved you ain't bad. Yeah, ain't bad at all, sunshine. Know what I mean?
Alright. Great, everyone. Well, that was it. That was Grand Theft Auto. that was it. That was literally it. That was just the cutscenes. And, yeah, otherwise it was all the gameplay. So, yeah, I didn't feel like I needed to do a whole Let's Play for that. I feel like a reaction would suffice. And I like the documentary. I think that was really cool. But, wonderful. Thank you guys for watching. So, to see our reaction to Grand Theft Auto 2, go ahead and click in the top right corner there. And then to see our full Let's Play of Grand Theft Auto 3, go ahead and click in the top left corner here. But that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. I love you very much. Until next time, later days.